Hej och välkommen till min video eller podcast. This is in Swedish. Hello, welcome to my video or podcast. For some of you who have been following my post or YouTube page lately, my Instagram, I've written a post about how I've been studying Swedish for the last 3 or 4 months. And I'm currently learning that because of multiple reasons, which I'll give you later on. And I decided to kind of make like a little announcement, a little topic announcement or theme for my YouTube channel. So for quite some time now, about 2 years, roughly speaking, I've been making a lot of videos on philosophical or psychological questions, primarily with another person, another guest on my website, my YouTube channel. And we've discussed many various questions. And I always found not only philosophy and psychology interesting, but also many other subjects as well. And one of them is language or languages. I like to learn new languages. And for some of you who might know or might not know, I speak currently 5 languages. And I include Swedish to be the 5th language at the moment. And it is, of course, difficult to define at what point you are able to count or consider a language to be a spoken language for you. So everyone has a little bit of a different definition. For me personally, Swedish is relatively easy because it's a Germanic language, and B, there are a lot of English or German words that are either borrowed or were modified over time. And the grammar is pretty easy as well. It takes, well, I'm not gonna say that grammar is incredibly light, but it is definitely much easier than if you were to take any other language, such as French, which has a lot of exceptions and a lot of different nuances that you have to consider when you speak French. And as for some of you who know, French people are pretty, let's say, a little bit sharp when it comes to using the right grammar, the correct grammar. And if you ever dare to make a mistake, then they're gonna let you know for sure. I decided to kind of experiment on my channel, and the whole idea of launching a Swedish theme playlist on my channel is primarily to simply discuss the language, to discuss how I learned the language, how I proceed with certain things, and also just to kind of show you how easy or maybe not easy it is to learn Swedish in particular, or any language for that matter. But of course, I also have to remind you that every language is different and has to be learned differently. To elaborate some of the reasons why I chose to speak Swedish or I chose to learn Swedish is primarily because A, it's a new language. It's not a language that I usually would use on a daily basis. I don't live in Sweden, and I personally don't really need to speak Swedish. I'm not required, I'm not forced to speak Swedish with anyone, be it for business reasons or personal reasons, etc., etc. And 2, I do have personal ties to Sweden. I had or still have relatives in Sweden, and I do have Swedish heritage, so to speak. And I also figured, why not? It's a language that is easily attainable and easily manageable. You can learn it very quickly, and by quickly, I mean that it is not as difficult as learning. For me personally, I can only speak for myself. It's not as difficult as learning Chinese or Japanese or any other Asian language, for example, where you have a complete different alphabet system and a different order and all the other nuances that I'm not even aware of, quite frankly speaking. So I'm not going to speak on that behalf. But I will definitely speak on behalf of the Germanic languages, and I have particular interest in that, and I've always had that. And philology and linguistics is something that have been ingrained in my mind for quite a long time. And I was never someone who was more mathematically based, so to speak, meaning how I distinguish people, let's say, in terms of like academic interests is kind of twofolded. So there's one type of group that has a big interest in humanistic subjects. So that is economy, psychology, philosophy, theology, you name it. All these kind of subjects that are not really precise, that are not based on accuracy, precision in numbers, like in terms of numbers and mathematics. And whereas there's the other camp that I like to call I would say more the mathematical people, the logical, the physical, chemical people who have a great interest in all these types of subjects, as I just mentioned before, who deal more with precision and determinism and want to always have conclusions at the end and have precise data. They work more with data. And I, as a person, personally speaking, I was never that type of guy. I was rather more the humanistic type of person, academic. And I always found interest in philosophy, psychology, economics, if you want to call it that way, and so on and so forth. So, and that also includes languages. And for me, languages have always been quite easy to learn, starting from school all the way up to college, high school, etc. And I personally believe that learning a language in general is always good. There's nothing really negative about that. I cannot even mention one single point that is negative about not learning a language, but I can name multiple benefits and plus points of learning a language. And one of them is definitely that you sharpen your mind daily, that you keep your mind very fresh. And number two, that you also learn the language of another country, that if you ever do go to that country, that you will be able to properly communicate in that language and hopefully understand each other, no matter how difficult some dialects might be or some pronunciations or certain nuances. Of course, you will never master a language, so to speak. And believe me, someone who speaks English, there's also a lot of things for me to learn in that language, and I'm nowhere near perfect in English, no matter how much I speak at home and elsewhere. And I really want to encourage people to learn a language. I'm not here to shove Swedish down people's throats. I'm just using Swedish as an example to demonstrate the interest and also certain particular methods and ways how to learn a language. And perhaps you might find interest in Swedish, who knows? And perhaps you might feel motivated and have that particular desire to learn, pick up a language and carry on with that, And of course, granted, Swedish is not exactly the most popular language in the whole world. It is primarily spoken by, I would say, about 10 to 12 million. I think that's the population of Sweden. I think Sweden has 10 million people. So, and if you add maybe 1 or 2 extra million just to have a buffer in there, because a lot of Swedes moved to America and of course other countries. And so just to roughly calculate, it's about 12 million people out of how many, 7.8 billion people in this world. So it's definitely a huge minority if you want to talk about that. And of course, I'm not here to endorse or promote Sweden or endorse anything of that sort. This is just my personal interest in that. But what my personal idea or my personal motivation for that is to definitely encourage people to learn a language and to share their experiences ultimately. And I also want to hear and see what other people do or use as a method for learning a particular language, regardless of what language it is. So yeah, in other words, I definitely want to put this as a trial in my YouTube channel for now. And I just want to see how it goes, how people react to it. And if I see that people do not react positively to it, then I'll definitely modify it and change it. And if I do see that people find interest in languages in general and perhaps Swedish in particular, then of course I will continue that. And I'll certainly make a playlist out of it. And I'll see what kind of questions or topics I can discuss in that realm, so to speak. And one of the ideas that I had was to certainly talk maybe about the history of Sweden, to talk about the Swedish language history, to talk about how grammar is structured for some of you who might find interest in that, who are actually in a serious phase of learning a language in Swedish. And of course, I personally, from what I can tell, for those of you who are asking how good is my Swedish, I can tell you that I've only started learning Swedish 4 months ago. And But to be honest, I started way earlier than that, but I had a bit of an on and off with that language because I wasn't that consistent, and I admit I wasn't that disciplined in learning a language. And only about 3-4 months ago, starting March, I really picked it up and I put my full out dedication to learning the language, and I'm gonna keep striving for that until I really achieve a certain level of that language. And from now I can say that I am around A2/B1 in terms of reading and understanding. Speaking is obviously not my greatest strength at the moment. It's a bit harder because I have a hard time finding a Swedish partner or a Swedish colleague or any of that sort who can just communicate with me in Swedish and to correct me. So I'm kind of on my own, and this is something that I'll be discussing perhaps in the future videos on the metas and how to improve your skills, how to improve and enhance your language learning in a much faster process, and so on. And basically ever since I started learning 4 months ago that language, I've been really consistent every day. I've been listening and writing and reading Swedish on a daily basis, and I hope that I can share some of those experiences with you in the future upcoming videos. So that'll do for now, or that'll do for this week. There was no philosophical question. I will definitely get back to you with some more philosophical issues next week. But of course, if you have any pressing questions, pressing issues that you'd like to hear from me or discuss with me, of course, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.